Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Making sure I got the mic on. Okay, we're good. Listen, we were supposed to be, you and I today were supposed to have a conversation, just Jimmy, but we are honored this morning to have with us the chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, Steve Kerrigan. I didn't tell him in the pre-convo, but I've heard his name around for years with folks locally who are involved with the party, and see him ascend to this position has been great. We're going to hear a little bit of his story, get a little preview of the DNC, maybe talk a little local politics, and go on from there. But I'm not going to belabor his time because I know he's getting ready to get out of here and has some things to do locally as well, because all politics are local. But we want to welcome for the first time to the Java Cafe the chair of the Democratic National Party, but the state Democratic Party. I was about to give you a promotion, but Steve, or should we call you Chair Kerrigan? What do you prefer, sir?
Steve is perfectly fine. Thanks.
Steve is perfect.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
I am excited to have you here with us. There are a lot of things to discuss, a lot of topics, but I want to just take advantage of also having the opportunity when folks of your caliber come into the cafe. I think it's important for the audience to hear a little bit of their story. They may see you in the paper and on the news, but being able to have an intimate conversation here is one of the things that we take pride in. And so, Steve, welcome. Greet the audience this morning. I see you got your coffee and your
Got my Java with Jimmy right here.
And the Mass Dems cup.
And
so I'm not mad at the merch.
Yeah. Don't mess around.
Yes, sir. So please tell us a little bit about your story and who you are, and more on the personal side, if you don't mind. And then we can sort of get into your political ascension to where you are today and share with us, that aspect as well. But I really want people to hear why you are so passionate about the electoral process and why you find your values more associated with the Democratic Party than the other folks. So, Steve, I'm going to behave today as much as I can.
Why? It's not nearly as fun, Jimmy. That's not nearly as fun.
Don't give me permission, sir. No, but but please greet the folks, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Hey, everybody. As Jimmy said, I'm Steve Kerrigan. I'm the chair of the Massachusetts Democratic Party. I grew up in a town in central Massachusetts where my husband and I live now, Lancaster. It's a little town northeast of Worcester.
Wait a minute, Steve, hold on for 1 second. Hold on. You said your husband?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll talk. We're part of the same community, but go ahead, sir. We'll chat about that maybe at an after dark later. But go ahead. I'm so sorry. I just caught that.
Quite all right. Not a problem. So I was born to two union members. My dad was a utility worker for Mass Electric. He climbed utility poles for 30 plus years. And my mother was an MTA member. She was the school secretary at a public elementary school for 41 years. And they raised my brother, sister, and I. You asked why I'm passionate about the Democratic Party and my values. They sort of raised us understanding what organized labor meant to our family, and by extension, what the Democratic Party's support of organized labor meant to our family. My dad was on strike a lot when I was a little kid, and one particular strike went on for months and months, and we went on assistance, which is what it's there for. And I remember my mother putting their tax return in the freezer, where she literally had cold hard cash. She would just like peel off a little bit of money to take it to the grocery store.
Literally, Steve?
Yeah, she'd literally
put it about humble beginnings, sir. Oh my God. Okay.
But I learned from them early on, like that this is our society. This is our country, and we all have a voice in it and a role to play. And being parts of organized labor were big for my parents. And so growing up, I was really taught to pay attention to civics education. I was very excited about sort of social studies classes, things like that. And I chose to go to college at the University of Maryland, right outside of Washington, because I wanted to be in Washington and get an internship and all that jazz. And so I started as an intern in Ted Kennedy's office 3 days before my 18th birthday in the mailroom. And
wait a minute. So now you got another classic. So you got the cold hard cash, literally, and then the story of starting out in the mailroom.
Yeah, it was great. And, there's a state representative from Hyde Park, Rob Consalvo, who was an intern right alongside me in the mailroom back 30 plus years ago. Robbie was an intern with me when we were both teenagers. Yeah. Long time ago. And in that job, of course, I learned to be willing to do anything and work, like answer letters, open mail, whatever it was. But I really got an understanding through Ted Kennedy's example of what public service was about and what the great honor it meant to be able to represent people. Politics is very personal to me. It's about policy and about what we're able to do for people in our neighborhoods and on our streets and in our country, in our world. And so I got a chance. I was supposed to do 1 semester there, Jimmy, and I stayed all through college and then worked for him for 10 years after that. So it was a crazy ride. I was actually going to become a monk when I graduated college. It was going to become. This is a long.
So you got a ministry background as well.
Well, I'm a man of faith. Certainly, I was raised a Catholic and still consider myself a Catholic. But yeah, I was going to become a monk, and then soon after college graduation, I decided to put that on hold and stay working in the Senate, and it was a great experience. So from then, I went on. I worked for him for a long time, did a lot of great things in DC and in Boston, and then went on to work for the Attorney General of Massachusetts and then become the Chief of Staff in the AG's office. I worked on the convention here in Boston in 2004 as the Chief of Staff for the host committee back 20 years ago.
I remember the DNC when it was here.
A lot of fun, a lot of work.
Didn't Barack Obama deliver his
that was his first.
Yeah, was here. Yes, sir.
Yeah. That was his famous red state, blue state speech that launched him onto the national stage, which was great. Then speaking of him, Senator Kennedy called me in 2008 and said I had to go to Chicago to work for Barack Obama. So I was tired and didn't really want to do it, but he was a very convincing man. So I went to Chicago for the last few months of the campaign. It was an experience of a lifetime. And then was asked to be Chief of Staff for President-elect Obama's first inauguration. Which I had no idea what that meant, but did it. And it ended up being the largest planned event in the history of the country.
Was it the biggest crowd?
It was the biggest crowd, despite what the 45th president says to folks. It was the biggest crowd. And actually his second inaugural, which I was co-chair of, was also the biggest inaugural.
Wow.
And then after that, I decided to run for lieutenant governor because I really was committed. I ran the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte in 2012, I should say that, which was a great experience. And then after the second inaugural, decided to run for lieutenant governor here in Massachusetts because I saw firsthand some of the folks that were going to Washington on both sides, frankly, as becoming much more divisive. And I wanted to be a part of the solution because I thought our party has an opportunity to lead by example and to help people solve problems in their lives and build a better, stronger future. People don't want handouts; they just need things a little bit easier, a little bit better, like a little bit more opportunity. They're willing to do the work, but they need leaders who are willing to meet them on that fair ground. And so that's when I decided to run for lieutenant governor. It was an experience. I tell people all the time, other than falling in love, it was one of the best things I've ever done in my life. It was fantastic to cross all over the Commonwealth and meet tens of thousands of people over the course of the campaign. We came up short, which is also what inspires me to do party work, because we lost by 9 votes a precinct. And so I believe very strongly in precinct-based organizing because
9 votes a precinct.
Yeah. But for 9 votes a precinct, Charlie Baker wouldn't have been governor. We might have had early childhood investment in education. We might have had a transportation plan that made sense. We might have had a climate plan that made sense a lot earlier, things like that. All the things that Governor Healey's doing now would have done 8 years earlier. But
Yeah.
so that happened. And I went back to consulting and dedicating most of my time to nonprofit work. I serve on a lot of boards. I serve on the board of Reproductive Freedom for All for the last 9 years, focused on reproductive rights for folks, because reproductive freedom is an economic issue. It's a racial issue. It's a culturally, like all those things.
Yeah.
And 8 in 10 Americans believe in legal access to reproductive rights. And so we're on the right side of this, and it's going to help us win elections this year because Republicans keep going after people's rights. And then in 2019, I get recruited to a job that I never thought I would take, which is as president and CEO of a community health center that has sites in Worcester, Framingham, and Milford. And so I've been doing that for the last 5+ years. And then a year and a half ago, the governor asked if I would also take on chairing the party. So it's been a busy time. Yeah.
It's interesting being familiar. Remember seeing your name and running for lieutenant governor. But I always say that, and this is with people that I have, much more of a rapport with and engage with more. And when they come on, I'm just sitting. I talked to a young man yesterday and have seen him around and known him for a while. But when we have these conversations, you get to hear people's stories and why they move the way that they do. And I think it's so important before we get into the politics for people to understand the personal. Yeah. You coming from a union home and coming from organizing and just your, I won't say political ascension, but your servitude, your servant leader ascension, sort of, if you will. And so thank you for sharing that. And so let's jump in.
Sure.
In politics. I want to end on a good note, so maybe we'll talk about the preview of the DNC. Sure. But Steve, you mentioned that things have become so divisive, not just within parties, but there was the thing about what was going on with the delegates and all this other stuff. And someone that we are both aware of made a statement many years ago and said all politics are local. With what's going on in the national, can you give us just sort of a purview of where we are in Massachusetts? I think, and I say it often, I think Massachusetts is pretty good. I don't think we're going to lean purple at all, but we can't necessarily take things for granted. You talked about not being victorious by 9 votes a precinct. Where are we at locally when it comes to the current state of things in national politics?
Yeah, so I look at politics. I mean, I think your comment, what Speaker O'Neill said, all politics is local, is fantastic. And it relates to his first ever race for office, city council in Cambridge. And he'd been mowing the lawn and shoveling the driveway of this woman on his street for years. So he never bothered to ask her for her vote, and he lost by a handful of votes. And he was bemoaning it to her, and she said, "Tom, I didn't vote for you." And he said, "Why?" And she said, "You never asked." And so it is. He never lost another election after that. But it's a reminder to me, as I'm also serve as the chair of the select board in my hometown, and the work we do at the state party is really important, both for local and for national and state stuff, because you have to give our candidates the resources they need to win elections. So remember, as you alluded to, like our 11 electoral votes are pretty firmly locked up for Kamala Harris at this point. Yeah. Can't imagine they're going to go any other way. We haven't had a Republican member of the House sent to Washington in decades. We had Scott Brown for a 2-year blip about a decade and about 12 years ago. Luckily, he's gone. But in the state house, we've got super majorities, but the Republican Party could easily start growing there. And they start growing in city councils, school committees, library boards of trustees, select boards, everything. And so one of the first things I did as chair was start a program called Blue Local, which is to invest in our local town, city, and ward committees to give them the resources to organize, to help them figure out how to recruit candidates, to support candidates, to run canvases, to run phone banks. So give them that support, because I think a party, whether it's local, state, or national, there are responsibilities to be a resource for our candidates and our committees. And so That's been a big push. So we've seen a big increase in town committees being active and in recruiting, because if we go back to, I worked in the Senate in 1994 when Newt Gingrich had the contract on America, where the Republicans took over both the House and the Senate. And he started planning to do that a decade before by recruiting city council candidates, all that stuff. And we got to stop that. We've seen that game plan and we can't let it win a second time. Right. So that's what we're committed to, is to make sure that did enough damage to the country and the world. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Absolutely. You made a statement that, we can't imagine, the 11 electoral going somewhere. And I mean, that's pretty much solid based on the system, whatever our opinions are about the electoral college system versus popular vote. But we've seen some pretty things that we would have never imagined taking place. If I could allow you just for a minute to speak to just, how can I frame it? To speak to the intentional one distraction of sound bites, negative, being derogatory, xenophobic, just anti-LGBTQ plus, just almost anti-human. Can you speak to the nature of things in that point and how some folks, and we can have a little bit of conversation. My demographic happens to be the number one targeted for information, Black and brown men. And they're very valuable in this, in all elections, but there's something different here. What advice do you give to people I saw on CNN last night that they found out that Iran has, and I mean, this isn't surprising, this happened in 2020 and probably 22, literally creating fake news stations and accounts to put out inaccurate information. How do we avoid the noise?
So that is a hefty question. It is. So it's incumbent on you and me and every voter, every citizen, every participant in humankind to A, be engaged, and then B, to find trusted sources. Because the other side, when Newt Gingrich started that plan in the 80s to take over the Congress, they were disciplined beyond measure. Because they knew what they needed to do to win over groups. And then once they got that power, they refused to let those newly elected people talk to Democrats on the Hill. They created, it was very intentional, created a schedule where Republicans didn't stay in Washington very long. They dehumanized the entire process. And what's the issue with the Republican Party now is that they've taken that dehumanization to an epic level. So it is just about reducing everything to clickbait, to sound bites that make sense with no substance behind it. And I do think, and I'm going to say, I do think there are well-intentioned Republicans out there who want to get back to a time when both parties were focused on policy and progress and not just, bloviating and yelling at each other and all that. But it is this particular election cycle. And Donald Trump is amazing and just an interesting, hopefully blip in the history of our country, because he's the first president I know of who, and I've run 2 inaugurals and I've worked on 2 conventions. He's the first president I know of who became president. And the first thing he did was try to reduce who he supports and who he represents.
Yes.
His speech, his inaugural address in 2017, he talks about American carnage and how everything was so terrible. Presidents, no matter what party before that, had always tried to bring our country together, try to open up the aperture of their power and try to envelop people more. He has done nothing to do that, which is why he loses, because the American people are tired of that. And I will say that shift in the politics in the last few weeks alone are because people are exhausted. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz now represent a breath of fresh air, some youth and vigor, and some energy that is about you all, about us, about our families. Like I hear, when Tim Walz and Harris speak about their upbringing, I hear that. When I see the Republican Party going after Kamala Harris for how she identifies, I hear that. And I mean, all of us can see more of us and them than we can in the crazy right-wingedness of the Trump campaign. So I would encourage folks to find news sources they trust, which is hard. It is hard. It is so easy. And I fall down the doom scroll on the phone, right? Where you just scroll, and you don't know where that's coming from, who put that up there, but all of a sudden it's in here and then it's news. So find news sources you trust and go to them often. Or find people you trust, people in your community, people in your church, people in your neighborhood who you know, because a lot of us don't have time to folks who are out there working 2-3 jobs don't have a time to research the best columnist from some newspaper, but they got a neighbor, they have a pastor, they have a friend, they have a brother-in-law. Talk with them about issues. Don't be afraid to communicate. Politics has become so polarizing that people don't want to talk about it anymore.
Right.
And the problem is politics decides so much of our lives, whether we know it or not. So being unengaged is not an option. So
thank you for that point, because I often say here, and I got it from, you may remember this name, former State Representative Carlos Enriquez, often talks about, if you flush the toilet, you're political. If your children go to your public school, you're political. If you stop at the stoplight on your city street, you are political. Yeah. And so I have to also balance, I think a lot of people that aren't as engulfed and aren't political wonks and don't get excited when certain things come across Twitter, you're like, wait, it is real for them that some of what you named in the nastiness and the divisiveness over the years have really turned people off from sort of the surface level of politics. But like you said, there was a time that, and let's also say there's more than two parties. I mean, yes. I know, one of the major, but we were able to, as they say, cross the aisle and prioritize humanity. And it's so I get why some folks don't want to be bothered. And I thank you also for naming the folks that want to be bothered, but really can't, because they're working 3 jobs. They got kids. They're dealing with an aging parent who may have a sickness, a life debilitating sickness. And so thank you for balancing that. I'm going to ask you in real time. What's your drop dead time? Because I'm going to take advantage of it to the last 30 seconds. When do you have to get off of here?
I was told to hold until at least 9:45. So
okay, so we got a few more minutes. Yeah. You referenced to the new energy.
Yeah.
And okay. So now you're going to get some. You told me I could be free to be me. Let me get you a full screen there. You went and got the. I'm so mad.
My husband designed this logo, so we had these made.
Wait a minute, now, just in general, or for the he's involved.
I had them made. But if you let me know the size of your phone, Jimmy, we'll get you one.
Right now. I think it's a. I didn't upgrade. I think it's a 14 Pro. I think
this is.
So we'll email Steve Wilder and get him the address. But no, so I mean, even in that exchange right there, I mean, I was excited. I have to give respect and homage to that great man. I've always called him Uncle Joe. Years ago, it was like, come on, Uncle Joe, we want you to run. And if we've got a couple of seconds to just, I'm sure you've met with him and observed him and have talked with him. Can we take about 30 seconds, and honor him for his service? And then after that, we'll talk about sort of the switching, the excitement, any feelings, anything that you had about towards it. But can we just honor our president for a couple of seconds? Anything you want to share there?
Thank you for doing that. So I first got into Joe Biden, like obsessed with Joe Biden, when I worked in the Senate, and he and Senator Kennedy shared a few committees together. And I was sorry, my dog wants to get in the conversation too. So I was an 07 Biden supporter. And when he didn't make it past the primaries in 08, I was super excited when Senator Obama chose him to be his running mate, because he brought exactly what he ended up bringing. So I was an early Biden person in 19 as well. And I'm really, really proud of that. And what I like to say about what he did on July the 21st is to know Joe Biden. To know Joe Biden is to love Joe Biden. And what he did was a very ordinary thing for Joe Biden, but an extraordinary act of patriotism. He put our country above himself, above his lifelong dreams, and above the party. And in doing so, he did what he always does, which is lead by example and show us all how to be better Americans, how to be better citizens, and how to be better people. And he hasn't stopped either, by the way. Like, we just had a historic hostage negotiation. He's working on agreements all around the world and right here in this country. He's committed to Supreme Court a reform, which no president's been willing to touch. He's a remarkable. I was going to say he's a remarkable president, but he's just a remarkable man. Yeah, and I'm proud to know him.
We'll get into everything that happened. We're going to take a break in 1 second, if you don't mind, for 30 seconds. But I had to give space for that because one of the things, if you remember, he had no intention on running until Charlottesville happened. And, and I've said this, and I'm just curious to hear your thought. This is James and Steve here, that, we see your friend Barack Obama went in with black hair. He came out with gray hair. It's a thing that the presidency, they say that it ages folks. And I venture to say, Steve, that if Biden didn't become president, he was vice president, whatever's going on, we may have not seen whatever about his not being 100% cognitive, whatever is going on. And I just think that maybe if he didn't become president 10 years down the line, Jill would have issued maybe a statement that, Joe's years of service, he is resting now and da-da-da-da. And and we got to have a conversation, Steve, also one day in this country about ageism.
It is the only acceptable form of discrimination left in our society. And I don't understand how it's acceptable. I don't get it. Yeah.
I've never heard the only acceptable form of
discrimination. You would never have said, if he were gay, you would never have said he can't be president because he's gay.
Well, we wouldn't, but some people would. Yeah. Got you.
Some people say about Harris and said it about Obama can't be because of person of color. All that, but that's not acceptable. It's acceptable to say because he's older, and I find that to be wholly un-American.
We with all of that conversation, I still appreciate the fact that Uncle Joe did what he did. And so on the other side of this break, we're going to talk about the energy and everything that has happened in the last few weeks, and you all getting ready, a few folks that I know getting ready to go to Chicago. And so folks, if you give us 30 seconds, we'll be right back with you. You know what? I'm going to skip the break. I want to take advantage of you. I want to take advantage of your whole time. All right. So Uncle Joe dropped, the news came out. I remember there's a couple of folks that are plugged in, and, it was, kind of, we thought it was going to be that Friday or Saturday kind of slow leak, slow news. And then I think it was that Sunday. Presumably you had an inkling, you're in the end. But I mean, when it became public, sir, what was your response in reference to him? And you kind of covered it a little bit, but then now we have the new nominee.
Right.
What went on in that first 6 to 12 hour period? How was your phone?
My phone was blown up. So we had been at an event the night before in Provincetown with Vice President Harris. And we had a great few minutes talking with her, and what I love about her is many things, but every time she talks to me, she's focused on field and how many volunteers were sent to New Hampshire and like real data. It's not like just fluffy stuff. It's really impactful stuff. So we had that chat. And then the next day we were driving, we just crossed the bridge off the Cape and the announcement came out. And I firmly believe she did not know that was coming out until just before it did. We took a moment, my husband and I think, to, give due deference to President Biden. And then I started getting on the phone with my team. We had set up a series of phone calls. I started calling through delegates to see where they stood, to see where they stood.
Can you park there for 1 second? Because one of the things the other side was trying to do was talk about the fact that there wasn't a process, and she was, and I also believe that President Obama didn't come out as quick as he did because he wanted to hold off on what someone trying to say was this automatic coronation.
I agree.
But there was work.
A ton of it. And I will say this, like, I know conventions better than most in this country. The process is that you elect delegates at the primaries. You don't elect people. You elect delegates. They get elected by their neighbors at caucuses a few months later. And those folks are pledged to support the candidate who won their district or the percentage. And in this case, it was all Joe Biden. The moment he was no longer a candidate, which is why they did it in 2 phases, I believe. He withdrew from the race, and then a half hour later or so asked folks to
keep a clear line of demarcation.
Very clear line. Yeah, that's how I read it.
Yep.
And that meant once he said he was no longer a candidate, this was an open convention. Anybody could have started on those phones. Anybody could have put the work in to get. All they needed was 300 delegates to sign a petition to support their campaign.
From each state, right? It had to be 300 delegates.
No more than 50 from any given state.
Yep.
So it prevents California from just having 300 California delegates pick somebody. So anybody could have done it. Harris and by the way, the petition wasn't even out yet because it was supposed to come out later in the week. But they started calling delegates, they started calling leadership and folks, and started locking in support. And so by the time the petitions came out, she already had the pledged support of the vast majority of delegates. So when I say the system works, and it frustrates some reporters, when I say the system worked, it did. These delegates who had been previously pledged were no longer pledged. And then there was a new candidate. By the way, by the time she wrapped up all of the delegates, she was the only candidate. She still is the only candidate. Nobody else entered the race. So I don't know how it's people wanting another open process without actually understanding what that means. But she did the work. She said that day on the 21st of July that she would work to earn that nomination. And I'll tell you, I was on the phone with her campaign until 1 a.m. that Sunday night. That was the last call I did. I fell asleep in a chair in our den. And by then we had locked up almost every Bay State delegate. And then we finished it in the morning. And then we did an official vote that evening on Monday. We were one of the earlier states to do it, but we were proud to because, it's a moment, right? Like,
let's go there. What is this moment, sir? What is it?
So I felt this. I'm a tactician in politics, right? Like there's things that must be done. But every now and again you have to, and I say this to the staff all the time, and I'm telling them this for next week. Every now and again, look around and realize what you're doing. Absorb the moment, absorb what's happening for the rest of the world. Because we're working in it and we're in the weeds and we're checking names off a list and putting them in one column or another column. But the rest of the world is seeing this incredibly talented and qualified mixed race Black and South Asian woman ascend to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, which in our 240-year history has never happened before, which is crazy in and of itself. But we get a chance to be a small part in that, but the country gets a chance to benefit from it. So it's just one of these things that, and to see Joe Biden, who was a huge partner to Barack Obama, the first Black president, in the foreign policy field, and in bringing that institutional knowledge to a very young man in the job, to see him after appointing the first Black woman to the U.S. Supreme Court, a promise he made during his campaign, and then in essence, to see him pass the baton, not just to a new generation, but to a Black woman. That's it. My brother and friend manager, Anthony Davis, we were talking, and the symbolism of this demographic white man passing the baton to this Black woman. That is major. And I think people missed sort of a moment in a macro level. Yeah. I think missed a micro, and some people observed it, but in the past, Biden may have said some things that weren't favorable toward equity toward Black folks. But the symbolism of what happened on that Sunday is major. And as much as people have talked about his legacy and whether him stepping back will tarnish it, he will forever be able to say that he helped garner the first woman and Black woman president of the United States, and Asian. Right.
So now I say this with all due respect, because I tell people I'm a twofer. I'm a Black homo. So, and I don't mean that respectfully. I just jokingly say that.
Yeah.
I can say that with us.
Yes, you can say that to me.
And yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you know, so he has three perspectives there that will, I think, pretty much keep his legacy intact. And who knows what we're going to see from him when he steps up there.
And Jimmy, don't forget, back in May of 2012, he was the one who said to a reporter that he thought gay couples should have the right to marry.
Early. And you see where we are.
You know, not long before Barack Obama, but before. I mean, he's like the living embodiment of the evolution of what white men his age have gone through and what society's gone through. Right?
Steve.
He's evolved on race. He's evolved on choice. He's evolved on gay rights. But he's understood that was necessary, and why he did that evolution was because he understands the intrinsic value in every human being and all of our roles in protecting those rights. And he is just what I will say, to go back to the earlier part when we were talking a little bit more about him, what he did by running, because he believed he was the only one who could beat Donald Trump, which I'm convinced he was. He sacrificed the last 10 years of his life. He could have been out, not a golfer, but he could have been out making money on elections, like doing all those things, but he sacrificed it for this country. And I agree with you. I think his legacy is cemented forever as one of the most consequential presidents in American history. Yeah.
Steve, I'm very excited about the potential of what we have to see. We haven't departed from the honeymoon as of yet. As you use the word, the little blip about Tim Walz, whatever, in excitement maybe speaking or whatever, but we have the convention coming. So you're going to get the bump next week. Yeah, look at you. You got excited.
I love a convention. It's going to be great. Yeah. I mean, think about it. On Monday, we get to hear from both President and First Lady Biden, Dr. Biden, and Hillary Clinton. And then later in the week, we've got President Obama, President Clinton. We're going to hear, of course, from Governor Walz and from Vice President Harris. I suspect we'll hear from Governor Healy on that stage and other leaders like her.
Is this a little?
No, I'm just saying she's played a prominent role in this in the Biden campaign. She continues to do so in the Harris campaign. So we're excited for that. But it's just we haven't done this in person in 8 years, and because of COVID.
So this is going to be
off
after
the hook.
The business. Let's just be real. After the business, Chicago's going to be a little turned up.
I'm going to bed every night after the business, Jimmy. I'm tired, but the most important part about conventions is, I firmly believe this. It sets us up for that final sprint, and it gives those activists in the room their marching orders for the final weeks and months of the campaign. It also gives the vice president a worldwide audience to make her pitch to voters and to our allies and to markets and to everybody else as to why she's fit to be our president. But it's just going to be a fantastic. I mean, I remember that my dog agrees.
He's good. He's excited. Shoot.
He's very excited. He's waiting for his Dogs for Harris collar. He has a Biden one, but he doesn't have.
Is your husband going to design one of those too?
No, maybe, but we get one coming on the order. But conventions are that opportunity to tell our story, and she's got a fantastic story to tell, and so does Governor Walz. And it's a story that's going to be about the future of this country as much as it is about how we got to here. And I just look forward to, you saw me smile when you mentioned convention. When I think about having planned 2 inaugurations, and I helped out with the Biden inauguration remotely because most of it was remote. So having worked on 3 of them, it is that moment of the peaceful transfer of power, which we haven't had also in a long time, between, God willing, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on January 20th is just, it's going to be, if Joe Biden's election to the presidency was a reset button opportunity, which changed, by the way, the trajectory of our country in ways we cannot. I mean, today is the anniversary of the signing of Social Security into law. Joe Biden's done more work as president to ensure Social Security's solvency than any president since FDR signed it. But
unlike others who were trying to,
get rid of it. I mean, that's what you end up having when you go back to, how do we talk to communities who feel disenfranchised or uninvolved or uninformed about it. Think about this. All of the things we need as human beings, education. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. Rights to decide what we do with our own body. We all know where they stand with that. And that's whether it's reproductive rights, rights to be able to take hormones or have your, a voice in your kids' decisions, being able to marry who you love, create a family the way you want to, whether it's IVF or as a gay couple adopting, all of these things. Medicare, Medicaid. Joe Biden was the first president to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. Republicans fought that. Insulin, huge.
Is now. Yes.
It's now $35 a month capped, and drug prices for seniors are capped at $2,000 for the year. No, presidents have talked about this stuff, but Joe Biden did it. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent in infrastructure, including Cape Cod bridges and water pipes in Boston. All of these things because of the work he did. So to the former representative's point earlier, if you stop at a stoplight, you're political. All of these things have an impact. And he wants.
We get to see him.
Yeah, he wants to be a part of the interview.
Call him over so we can read him. Oh, hi, buddy. He's like,
hi. He likes.
That was a good moment there.
So I really encourage all your listeners to get involved. And by the way, getting involved just means making sure you got to vote. Talk to your friends, stay engaged. Don't take for granted that because we have Democratic elected leaders here that we always will. Vote for them, support them. Talk to your friends in swing districts and swing states. Tell them why you're voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, or why you're voting for Democrats. And if they have any questions, have them hit us up at massdems.org, and we'll help them out. I encourage folks all the time to do this. There are X number of days, I want to say 78 or 80 days until November 5th. Early voting starts in Massachusetts on October 19th. Have your voice heard by voting as early as you possibly can, because you don't know what's going to happen on November 5th. Car breaks down, gas leak at your house. You don't know, appendicitis, and then you'll kick yourself if your voice isn't heard, because it's not the only election on the ballot.
That's right. There's the down ballot.
You got a U.S. Senate race. Elizabeth Warren's running for re-election. Members of Congress are up. Your entire state legislature is up, and critical countywide races and court races and things like that. So vote early. I won't do what Mayor Daley used to historically say: vote early and vote often. Just vote the one time you're allowed to vote.
I know, because especially in this climate. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Steve,
thank you so much for having me, Jimmy. I
appreciate you, sir. And I would love to have you come back, because as we said, as we started, all politics are local, and you did talk to him, and I'd like to have a time to go a little bit deeper with you about how the local party plans to be more intentional about engaging the most marginalized, the most of the communities that have felt the most marginalized. And in this sort of political realm of the Mass Democratic Party, there has definitely been a shift in the buzz. I used to hear about things going on since you've taken over. And so I'd love either right before the election or maybe right after to really check in about that. So we can, when you talk about getting involved, there's your local ward committee, there's parent and teacher associations. There are ways to be civically engaged away from doing what's one of the most important things, is casting your ballot on election day.
And that's the thing. I will say this, Jimmy. We've seen reductions in registered voters, particularly in communities of color. Massachusetts got a very low rate.
Reductions in registrations, not in voter participation, but even.
And so we've been working on that. But I will say this: in the week after Kamala Harris became the nominee, the average registration doubled in 1 week. So we went the week before, about 3,800 people. That was pretty regular. Registered to vote, young kids, whatever, people moving in. 7,900 people the week after she announced she was running for president. So double the amount of people. So there's hope there. We just have a lot of work to do. So also to your listeners, ask your friends if they're registered to vote. Go to vote.gov, like vote.com rather, show them where they can vote and how they can register to vote, and everybody be a part of it. Deadline to register to vote for our primary is August 23rd.
Shout out to Anthony Davis for making sure we have the information, and he'll be down there with you. And hopefully, folks, as you know, Steve is going to be very busy, and so we may not be able. Maybe Anthony can catch a video or something, but we may hear from him.
Definitely can. I will commit to that. Anthony knows how to reach us, so we'll get it done.
All right, Steve, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go. We're a little bit over time, and I want to stay in good graces with you. Thank you. Give your husband my best. And what's your dog's name?
Cooper.
Cooper. Bye, Cooper. He's like, who is this? And we'll get you my address so I can get my phone cover.
Please do.
All right, Steve, thank you very much, sir. Have a good day.
You too. Be well.
Listen, folks, this is what we attempt to do, is to bring folks into the Java Cafe to share information with you, and sort of peel back a little bit of the onion of who they are. And I heard some great things that informs how he, Anthony said he will hold him to that. How he just told his story and engaged and named some things proactively, because the question about the folks that the party hasn't done well with in engaging, he brought it up. I was waiting, and he took it from me because I was going to frame it, a certain way. And so we appreciate Sandra. Good to see you in the room over on IG, and all the other folks. Tuesday, Nikki, also Loud is over here as well. Good to see you, brother Obi. Brother Obi is over there, Miss Jackie, and everybody that's listening on Twitter. I keep telling you all on Twitter, go in the live chat and comment so I can see that you're here. But I thought it was important today, and I want to thank the Davis system, Anthony, Nisa, and Aaron, who made sure that we were able to get the chair of the state Democratic Party in the Java Cafe to speak with you. We're going to hear from him again and see how we can be very instrumental in lending our voice to what's going on here in our country. And so Belinda's point, I think she actually texted me or shared this with me about, the point of registering. Folks are out there registering, folks, but just ask people, are you registered to vote? Do you plan to vote? It takes at least a minimum of 10 contacts to get somebody out to vote. And so we got some work to do. All right, that's it for me today. We're going to get ready to wrap up. Tomorrow is Thursday, and we have 2 days left. Tomorrow, we're going to speak with Sarah Busby. She's a senior publicist and founder of Be the Buzz Agency, and we're going to talk about her work and the impact she's having there. And on Friday at 12 p.m., we are speaking with City Councilor Brian Worrell, continuing sort of in the vein of politics, and speak with him about his shepherding the budget through the City Council, and also his RISE program and some of the commitments that he was able to garner with other counselors around supporting some of the most marginalized communities here in our city. That's going to take place on Friday at 12 noon. But before that, on Thursday, it's going to be a busy end of the week. On Thursday, we will have our second recording of Black Java, no sugar, no cream. That is taking place actually tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at 135 Morrissey Boulevard at South Line. My space there is sponsored by Portal Innovations. We're chatting with Mike Dees, who is I actually saw one of his videos yesterday. I don't know if it's still closed, but he was outside of Popeyes in Roxbury, and Popeyes in Roxbury was closed in the middle of the day. And so he also brings in politicians and talks about issues from his perspective and his generation's perspective. Miss Mo Filler will be with us. She is a local influencer, host of Inside the Maze, which brings artists and creatives into a space to talk about their journeys. She's a singer. I've known her since she was a little girl, singing alto at Grace. I think at that time it was Grace Church of All Nations. And also Taylor Andre, who's a real estate agent, former radio personality, and just someone who is very opinionated in the space of politics and equity. She's going to be with us. And certainly, last but not least, Dart Adams, who is a writer or author, is being featured on a documentary that covers the election here in the city of Boston called Revolution, that is starting, I believe, dropping on August 24th, and he'll talk more about that tomorrow night. This will not be live. So if you want to be a part and hear the whole conversation and things that may not be edited out to cut the time down when we present it, you need to show up tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. For our seniors and our mothers board, I'm not stressing y'all because there's a lot going on that night and all that other stuff. But we will make sure that you are able to see that once the recording has been edited. We'll let you know when that is coming out. So please plan to join us, for those of you that can, tomorrow at 6 o'clock at Southline. And that's it. So, I'm going to publicly apologize to Sheik who was on with us yesterday. I was really trying to get down to City Hall, but we got a grant proposal that we're about to turn in, and it's due tomorrow. And we thought it was due, at some point somewhere it said it was due on the 27th. I know we saw that. And the date changed till tomorrow. So I went and sat with the Davis system yesterday. We got about 60% of it done. And so guess who's going to be sitting at home on the computer and getting some stuff done today? So, I got to try to cancel my 11 Jesus. Let me get off of here, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m. with Sarah Busby, senior publicist and founder of the Buzz Agency. Thank you for tuning in this morning, and y'all keep us in prayer about this grant that we're applying for, because it's going to be a game changer. All right, I'm getting off of here. Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon. Peace.